The morning I discovered what my own daughter had been telling people about me, I was standing in the produce section at Kroger, completely oblivious to the bomb that was about to detonate my entire world. I'd been reaching for a bag of apples when I heard Mrs. Henderson from down the street talking to another woman near the bananas. "It's so sad about those poor children," she was saying in that hushed tone people use when they think they're being discreet. "But honestly, I don't blame Jessica one bit for keeping them away. When your mother has a drinking problem, you have to protect your babies." My hand froze on the apple bag. Jessica, that was my daughter's name. And those poor children she was talking about, those were my grandchildren. 7-year-old Emma and 4-year-old Tyler, who I hadn't seen in 3 months because Jessica kept making excuses about why visits needed to be postponed. Before I reveal what really happened, please hit that subscribe button and like. I love hearing from viewers. What's your city? My name is Margaret Perry. I'm 58 years old, and I want to be crystal clear about something from the start. I am not an alcoholic. I enjoy a glass of wine with dinner maybe twice a week, and occasionally I'll have a cocktail when my husband David and I go out to celebrate something special. But apparently, my daughter Jessica Marie Hoffman had been painting a very different picture to anyone who would listen. I stood there in that grocery store, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Mrs. Henderson continued her conversation, completely unaware that the supposed problem drinker was standing 3 feet away from her, clutching a bag of Honeycrisp apples and trying not to hyperventilate. Jessica told me her mother showed up to Emma's birthday party last month completely intoxicated. Mrs. Henderson whispered. Can you imagine? A child's birthday party. That's when she decided she had to cut contact completely. The lies hit me like physical blows. I hadn't even been invited to Emma's birthday party. Jessica had called me 2 days before to tell me that Emma was sick and they were canceling the celebration entirely. I'd dropped off a present on their front porch and left, never knowing there had been a party at all. I abandoned my shopping cart right there in the produce section and drove straight home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. David was in his workshop behind our house, probably tinkering with that old motorcycle he'd been restoring for the past 2 years. He's always been my anchor in storms like this, steady, thoughtful, and incredibly protective of our family. After 35 years of marriage, he could read my moods better than I could read them myself. "David," I called out as I rushed through the back door. "David, I need you to come inside right now." Something terrible is happening. He emerged from the workshop, wiping his hands on an old towel, took one look at my face, and immediately guided me to our kitchen table. "Margaret, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "It's worse than a ghost," I said, sinking into my chair. "It's character assassination, and it's coming from our own daughter." I told him everything I'd overheard, watching his expression shift from confusion to disbelief to genuine anger. David has always been slow to anger, which makes it all the more powerful when he finally reaches that point. His jaw tightened as I repeated Mrs. Henderson's words, and when I got to the part about the birthday party, he actually stood up from the table. "She told people you were drunk at a party you weren't even invited to?" His voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. "Margaret, this explains everything. The canceled visits, the way she's been so cold on the phone lately, the excuses about the kids being too busy for grandma time." That's when I knew I needed to call my sister Linda. Linda Morrison has been my closest friend since we were children, even though we're technically sisters. She's only 2 years younger than me, but she's always been the one with the clearer head in crisis situations. She also happens to live just 10 minutes away from Jessica, and she has a way of finding out information that others might miss. "Linda, I need you to tell me honestly. I said when she answered her phone. "Have you heard anything strange about me lately? Anything about drinking or problems with the grandchildren?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, which told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke. "Oh, Margaret," Linda said softly. "I was wondering when you were going to find out. I've been going back and forth for weeks about whether to tell you. Jessica's been talking to people at Emma's school, at the grocery store, even at that little cafe downtown. She's been saying that you have a serious problem with alcohol, and that's why she can't trust you alone with the children." The room started spinning. Not only was Jessica lying about me, but she was doing it systematically, telling anyone who would listen. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a moment of poor judgment. This was a calculated campaign to destroy my reputation and justify cutting me out of my grandchildren's lives. "There's more," Linda continued reluctantly. "She's been telling people that you've been calling her drunk late at night, making demands about seeing the kids. She said you showed up at Tyler's preschool one day and embarrassed yourself. Margaret, I know none of this is true, but she's been very convincing. She even cries when she talks about it." I felt David's hand on my shoulder, steadying me as this new reality crashed over me. My own daughter wasn't just keeping me away from my grandchildren. She was actively destroying my reputation to cover her tracks. And the worst part was, I had no idea why. "Linda, I need you to help me figure out what's really going on here," I said. "Because something is very wrong, and I don't think it has anything to do with alcohol at all." And that's when the pattern snapped into place. The next morning, I couldn't bring myself to get out of bed until almost 10 o'clock. David had already left for his morning walk, and the house felt eerily quiet. I kept replaying Linda's words in my mind, each revelation cutting deeper than the last. My daughter hadn't just made up one story. She had created an entire fictional version of me, complete with embarrassing public incidents that never happened and late-night phone calls I never made. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago when David returned. His cheeks were flushed from the crisp November air, and he brought with him the scent of fallen leaves and morning frost. "You look like you haven't moved since I left," he said gently, hanging his jacket on the back of a chair. "Margaret, you can't let this destroy you. We need to figure out what's really going on with Jessica." "But what if people actually believe her?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if everyone in town thinks I'm some kind of unfit grandmother who drinks too much and can't be trusted with children? David, I haven't had more than a glass of wine with dinner in months, and I've never, ever called Jessica late at night demanding anything." David pulled out the chair next to me and sat down, his weathered hands folding over mine. "That's exactly why we know something else is happening here. Jessica knows you better than anyone. She knows you're not a drinker. So why would she choose this particular lie?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see Linda's silver Honda parked in our driveway. My heart sank. More bad news, probably. More details about Jessica's campaign against me that would make everything worse. David went to answer the door, and I heard Linda's voice in the hallway, urgent and slightly out of breath. When they walked into the kitchen together, Linda's face was flushed with excitement rather than the sympathy I'd been expecting. "Margaret, I think I know what this is really about," Linda said, not even bothering to sit down. "I couldn't sleep all night after our phone call yesterday, so I started thinking about the timeline. When did Jessica first start making excuses about you seeing the kids?" I had to think for a moment. "It was gradual, but I'd say it really started about 3 months ago. Right around the time she got that new job at the marketing firm." "Exactly," Linda said, her eyes bright with discovery. And when did she start telling people about your supposed drinking problem? You said she's been doing it for weeks, so maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago? Linda nodded vigorously. Margaret, I don't think this has anything to do with you at all. I think Jessica is in some kind of trouble, and she's using you as a scapegoat to explain why she can't have the children around family members who might notice something's wrong. David leaned forward in his chair. What kind of trouble are you thinking? I'm not sure yet, but think about it, Linda continued. Jessica has always been proud of you as a mother. She used to brag to her friends about how involved you were with the grandchildren, how much you helped her when the kids were babies. Why would she suddenly decide you're unfit? Unless she needs people to believe you're unfit for some other reason? The idea was starting to take shape in my mind, and it felt both terrifying and oddly relieving. You think she's keeping me away from Emma and Tyler because she doesn't want me to see something? Something that would make me ask questions? That's exactly what I think, Linda said. And the drinking story is perfect because it makes her look like a protective mother while making you look like the problem. Anyone who hears it would naturally side with her. David stood up and began pacing around the kitchen, his expression troubled. But what could she be hiding that would be so serious she'd destroy her mother's reputation to cover it up? We sat in silence for a moment, each lost in our own dark thoughts. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, marking time while my mind raced through possibilities. Financial problems? Marriage troubles? Something involving the children's safety? There's only one way to find out, I said finally, my voice stronger than it had been in days. We need to see Jessica face to face, and we need to do it in a way that doesn't give her time to prepare more lies. Linda nodded grimly. I agree. But Margaret, you need to be prepared for the possibility that whatever she's hiding might be worse than the lies she's been telling about you. I looked at both of them, David with his concerned blue eyes, Linda with her determined expression, and realized that for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't facing it alone. Whatever Jessica was really hiding, whatever had driven my daughter to such desperate measures, we were going to uncover the truth. But as I was about to suggest our next move, Linda's phone buzzed with a text message. Her face went pale as she read it, and I knew that whatever Jessica was hiding was about to come crashing into the light whether we were ready or not. What is it? I asked, watching Linda's face grow increasingly pale as she stared at her phone screen. Linda looked up at us, her voice barely above a whisper. It's from Jessica. She says she needs to talk to me urgently about something that happened with the children. David stopped pacing and turned toward us. What exactly does it say? Linda read from her phone, her voice shaking slightly. Linda, I know you talked to Mom today. Something happened with Emma at school, and I really need your advice. Can you come over? Please don't tell Mom yet. I'm scared about how she'll react. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken possibilities. My heart began racing as I processed Jessica's words. Something had happened with Emma, my granddaughter, and Jessica was scared about how I would react. This is it, I said, standing up from the table. This is what she's been hiding. Something's wrong with Emma, and she's been keeping me away so I wouldn't find out. David moved closer, his face creased with worry. What could be wrong that she'd think you couldn't handle it? You've always been so good with the children. That's exactly the point, Linda said, setting her phone down carefully. Margaret, what if Emma has been asking about you? What if she's been wondering why Grandma doesn't come around anymore, and Jessica is running out of ways to explain your absence? I felt a chill run down my spine. You think Emma knows something's not right? Children are smarter than we give them credit for, Linda replied. If Jessica has been telling people you're drinking, but Emma remembers you differently, she might be starting to ask uncomfortable questions. David rubbed his forehead, processing the implications. So Jessica reaches out to Linda because she needs help managing whatever Emma said or did, but she still doesn't want Margaret involved because that would mean admitting the lies. The pieces were starting to fit together in a way that made my chest tight with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. My own daughter had created such an elaborate deception that she was now trapped by it, unable to let me help with whatever crisis had emerged with my granddaughter. I'm going with you, I said to Linda, my voice firm with resolve. Linda shook her head. Margaret, if you show up unexpectedly, she might shut down completely. She's already spinning lies to protect whatever secret she's keeping. But Emma is my granddaughter, I said, my voice breaking slightly. If something's wrong with her, if she's been asking about me, she deserves to know the truth. She deserves to know that her grandmother loves her and never chose to stay away. David placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. What if we compromise? Linda goes first, finds out what happened with Emma, and then we decide together how to approach Jessica with everything we know. I looked between my brother and my friend, both trying to protect me while also helping me find my way back to my grandchildren. The rational part of my mind knew they were right, but every maternal instinct I had was screaming at me to get in the car and drive straight to Jessica's house. Fine, I said finally. But Linda, I need you to tell Jessica that you know about the drinking stories. I need you to tell her that her lies are falling apart and that the only way forward is the truth. Linda picked up her phone and stood up. I'll text her back and tell her I'm coming over. But Margaret, you need to be prepared for the possibility that when I come back, everything we thought we knew about this situation might change. As Linda typed her response to Jessica, I realized that we were about to cross a line from which there would be no going back. Whatever Jessica had been hiding, whatever had happened with Emma, we were about to bring it all into the light. But as Linda hit send on her message, her phone immediately buzzed with another text from Jessica, and the look of shock on Linda's face told me that we had already run out of time to prepare for whatever truth was waiting for us. Linda's face had gone completely pale as she stared at her phone screen. Margaret, we need to leave. Now. What does it say? I asked, but Linda was already grabbing her keys and heading for the door. Emma ran away from home 3 hours ago. Jessica found a note in her room saying she was going to find her real grandmother because she knows her mother has been lying to her. The world seemed to tilt sideways. David caught my arm as I swayed, the implications hitting me like a physical blow. My 10-year-old granddaughter was somewhere out there, alone, because she had figured out that something wasn't right about the stories she'd been told. How would she even know where to look? David asked as we rushed toward Linda's car. Kids today aren't stupid, Linda said, starting the engine before we'd even closed the doors. She probably looked me up online, figured out I was connected to Margaret. Jessica's text says Emma asked her last week why Grandma Margaret never calls or sends birthday cards, and when Jessica gave her the usual story about drinking problems, Emma said that didn't sound like the grandma she remembered. I was struggling to breathe normally as we drove through town. The image of Emma, still so small for her age the last time I'd seen her, wandering around trying to find me because she knew her mother was lying, made my chest feel like it was caving in. Where would she go first? I asked. She doesn't know my address. Jessica thinks she might have gone to the library to use their computers, Linda said, taking a sharp turn toward the downtown area. But that was 2 hours ago, and they've already checked there. David leaned forward from the back seat. Wait, has Jessica called the police? She's terrified to, Linda replied grimly. Because if this becomes official, if there's a police report and social services gets involved, all her lies about Margaret come out. She's more worried about covering her tracks than finding her daughter. The anger that surged through me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. Not only had Jessica kept me from my grandchildren with her lies, but now those same lies were preventing her from getting proper help when Emma was potentially in danger. Try my house, I said suddenly. Emma's smart. If she wanted to find me, she might have looked up property records or found my address somehow. She always was the clever one. Linda changed direction, heading toward my neighborhood. As we drove, I found myself praying harder than I had in years, bargaining with whatever forces might be listening to keep Emma safe until we could find her. There, David said quietly as we turned onto my street. Is that her? Sitting on my front porch steps, looking impossibly small in her pink jacket, was Emma. She had her arms wrapped around her knees and was staring at the ground, but when she heard the car door slam, she looked up. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the yard. She was taller than I remembered, her face more mature, but her eyes were the same bright green they'd always been. And right now, those eyes were filled with confusion, determination, and something that looked like relief. Grandma Margaret? She said, her voice uncertain. Hello, sweetheart, I managed, walking slowly toward the porch so I wouldn't frighten her. I've been hoping to see you for a very long time. Emma stood up, brushing off her jeans. Mom said you didn't want to see us anymore, but I remembered you differently. And when I asked her why you never called, even just to say happy birthday, she said it was because you had problems with drinking and couldn't be trusted around kids. The directness of her words, the matter-of-fact way she repeated the lies she'd been told, made my heart break all over again. But I could see in her face that she'd already figured out the truth wasn't matching up. I've never had problems with drinking, Emma, I said gently, sitting down on the porch step beside her. And I have wanted to see you and your brother every single day since your mother decided I couldn't. Emma nodded as if this confirmed what she'd suspected. I knew it didn't sound right. You used to read to me every night when I stayed over, and you always made pancakes in the morning. People who can't be trusted around kids don't do things like that. Linda and David had stayed by the car, giving us space for this moment I'd dreamed about for 3 years. But I could see Linda on her phone, probably texting Jessica to let her know Emma was safe. Your mother is probably very worried about you right now, I said carefully. Running away is dangerous, even when you're trying to solve a problem. I know, Emma said, looking down at her hands. But I had to find out the truth. And I had to tell you that I never stopped missing you, even when Mom said I should forget about you. I had to close my eyes for a moment to keep from breaking down completely. When I opened them, Emma was watching me with an expression far too serious for a 10-year-old. Grandma Margaret, why did Mom lie about you? Before I could figure out how to answer that question in a way that wouldn't damage Emma's relationship with her mother, Linda's phone rang with a call that I could tell from her expression was going to change everything we thought we understood about Jessica's motivations. Emma's question hung in the air between us, like a fragile bubble that might burst if I said the wrong thing. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the porch, and I could hear the distant hum of traffic from the main road. This moment felt both surreal and deeply familiar. Sitting with my granddaughter, her green eyes searching my face for answers I wasn't sure how to give. That's a complicated question, sweetheart, I said finally, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes people make decisions based on their own hurt feelings, And those decisions don't always make sense to other people. Emma frowned, picking at a loose thread on her jeans. But lying is wrong. You taught me that when I was little. You said even little lies can hurt people. The fact that she remembered something I'd taught her years ago made my throat tighten with emotion. You're absolutely right about that. And I'm sorry you've been caught in the middle of something that should have been worked out between your mother and me. Linda approached us cautiously, her phone still in her hand. David remained by the car, giving us space but staying alert. I could see the concern etched in the lines around Linda's eyes as she looked between Emma and me. "Emma, honey," Linda said gently, "we need to figure out how to get you home safely. Your mom doesn't even know where you are right now." "I left her a note," Emma said defensively. "I told her I was going to find Grandma Margaret and learn the truth. I'm not stupid. I brought money for the bus, and I looked up the address online." The thought of my 10-year-old granddaughter navigating public transportation alone to reach me was both terrifying and heartbreaking. She'd been so determined to bridge the gap that had been forced between us that she'd risked her own safety. "You're definitely not stupid," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "You're brave and smart and determined. But you're also 10 years old, and there are safer ways to solve problems than taking buses across town by yourself." Emma's shoulders sagged slightly. "I just missed you so much, Grandma Margaret." And when Tommy started asking questions about why we never see you anymore, I realized I didn't have good answers. Mom's stories about why you don't visit us never really made sense. David walked over to join us, his expression thoughtful. "Emma, can I ask you something? When did your mom first tell you about your grandmother having drinking problems?" Emma looked up at him, then back at me. "It was right after Dad moved out, maybe 3 years ago. Before that, she just said you were busy or traveling. The drinking thing came later, when I kept asking when you were coming to visit again. The pieces were starting to form a clearer picture, and it wasn't a pretty one. Jessica had used me as a scapegoat during one of the most difficult periods of her life, creating a villain to explain away the chaos of her divorce. What she probably hadn't anticipated was how that lie would grow and take on a life of its own." Linda sat down on the other side of Emma, creating a protective circle around her. "Sweetie, we need to call your mom and let her know you're safe. She's probably worried sick." "I know she is," Emma said quietly. "I didn't want to scare her. I just wanted answers, and I wanted her to know that I remember how things really were before she and Dad split up." The weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. This brave, determined little girl had risked everything to find the truth. And now, I had to figure out how to handle this situation without making things worse for her at home. "What do you want to happen now, Emma?" I asked. "Now that you've found me and we've talked?" Emma looked at me with those serious green eyes. "I want to see you again. I want Tommy to remember you the way I do. I want Mom to stop lying about why our family fell apart." She paused, then added in a smaller voice, "I want things to go back to how they were before everything got so complicated." My heart ached for her, for the innocence she'd lost in trying to navigate adult problems that should never have become her burden. The late afternoon air was getting cooler, and I could see goosebumps rising on Emma's arms. "Let's go inside where it's warmer," I suggested. "We can figure out the next steps together." As we stood up, Linda's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her expression immediately shifted to something between alarm and confusion. "What is it?" I asked. Linda looked at Emma, then at me, clearly unsure about whether to share whatever she'd just read. "It's from Jessica. she said slowly. She's not asking where Emma is. She's asking if we can all meet tonight to talk. She says there are things about the divorce that Emma doesn't know, and maybe it's time everyone knew the whole truth. Emma's eyes widened. Mom wants to talk to you? She's never wanted to talk to you before. The sudden shift in Jessica's approach felt ominous rather than hopeful. After 3 years of complete silence and active character assassination, why would she suddenly want to meet? What could have prompted this change of heart, and what truth was she referring to that even Emma didn't know? David frowned, looking between all of us. This feels like more than just a response to Emma running away. Something else is going on here. As if summoned by our conversation, a familiar car turned into my driveway. Through the windshield, I could see Jessica's face, and even from this distance, I could tell she looked nothing like the angry, defensive woman who had cut me out of their lives 3 years ago. She looked exhausted, frightened, and somehow smaller than I remembered. Emma grabbed my hand tightly. I didn't tell her where I was going exactly. How did she know to come here? But before anyone could answer, Jessica was stepping out of her car, and I could see that she wasn't alone. I watched as Jessica got out of her car, and my breath caught when I realized who was with her. Tommy emerged from the passenger side, looking confused and a little scared. At 7 years old, he seemed so much smaller than I remembered, but his resemblance to Emma was unmistakable. Tommy! Emma called out, releasing my hand and taking a few steps toward her brother. Emma! Tommy ran to his sister and she wrapped him in a protective hug. Mom said we were going to see Grandma. I thought she meant Grandma Ruth. Jessica walked slowly toward us, her movements careful and deliberate. She looked directly at me for the first time in 3 years, and I was shocked by what I saw in her expression. Gone was the cold anger I remembered from our last encounter. Instead, she looked like someone who had been carrying a tremendous weight for far too long. Hello, Margaret, Jessica said quietly. Her voice was hoarse, as if she had been crying. Jessica. I kept my voice neutral, unsure of what to expect. Emma said you wanted to talk. Linda stepped closer to me, a subtle show of support. The kids are here now. Whatever we discuss, we need to think about what they should and shouldn't hear. Jessica nodded, glancing at Tommy and Emma. Actually, I think Emma needs to hear this. She's old enough, and she deserves to know why I really kept her away from you. She looked down at Tommy, who was still clinging to his sister. Tommy, can you go sit on the porch steps for a few minutes? The grown-ups need to talk about some serious things. I want to stay with Emma, Tommy said, his voice small. Emma knelt down to his level. It's okay, Tommy. I'll be right here where you can see me. Just go sit on the steps and count how many different colored flowers you can see in Grandma's garden, okay? Tommy looked uncertain but nodded, walking over to the porch steps and settling down with his back to us, though I could tell he was still listening. Jessica took a shaky breath. Margaret, I owe you an apology that's 3 years overdue. She paused, seeming to gather her courage. You're not an alcoholic. You never were. I made that up. Emma gasped. Mom, what? I told people you had a drinking problem because I was embarrassed about the real reason I didn't want you around the kids. Jessica's hands were trembling now. The truth is, during the divorce, when everything was falling apart with David and me, you kept trying to get me to see a counselor. You kept saying I needed help dealing with my anger, that the way I was handling things was going to hurt Emma and Tommy. I remembered those conversations well. Jessica had been consumed with rage during the divorce. Not just at David, but at everyone around her. She had been lashing out at the children, at me, at anyone who tried to offer support or advice. You were right. Jessica continued, tears starting to fall. I was so angry I couldn't think straight. But instead of getting help, I decided you were the problem. I convinced myself that if I could just get you out of our lives, everything would be fine. The drinking story was easier to tell than admitting I was pushing away the one person who was actually trying to help me. Linda crossed her arms. So for 3 years, you let your mother-in-law think she had done something wrong? You let her believe her grandchildren were afraid of her? I know how it sounds, Jessica said quickly. I know how terrible it is. But once I started the lie, I didn't know how to take it back. And then time passed, and it got easier to just avoid the whole situation than to face what I had done. Emma was staring at her mother with a mixture of anger and confusion. But Mom, you said Grandma yelled at you when she was drunk. You said she scared Tommy. I made all of that up, Emma. Your grandmother never did any of those things. Jessica wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The only person who was yelling and scaring people was me? I was so overwhelmed and angry after the divorce that I took it out on everyone, including you and Tommy. Your grandmother was the only one brave enough to tell me I needed to get professional help. I felt a mix of vindication and sadness wash over me. After 3 years of wondering what I had done wrong, of replaying every interaction looking for the moment I had failed them, the truth was finally out. But seeing Jessica's obvious distress, I couldn't feel entirely satisfied by her confession. What changed? I asked. Why are you telling me this now? Jessica looked over at Emma, who was still holding on to Tommy protectively. Because my daughter ran away to find you. Because she's been carrying guilt that wasn't hers to carry, trying to fix a family that I broke with my lies and my pride. She turned back to me. And because last week I finally started seeing the counselor you recommended 3 years ago. She helped me realize that I needed to start making amends, beginning with the truth. Tommy had turned around on the porch steps and was watching us with wide eyes. Mom, are you crying? Yes, sweetie, but sometimes crying is okay. Sometimes it means someone is trying to fix something that's been broken. Jessica walked over and sat down next to him on the steps. Tommy, do you remember Grandma Margaret? Tommy looked at me shyly and nodded. She used to read me stories about dragons. My heart clenched. I still have those books, if you'd like to hear them again sometime. Emma was looking back and forth between her mother and me, clearly processing everything she had just learned. So all this time, Grandma didn't do anything wrong? No, sweetheart. Grandma didn't do anything wrong. I did. Jessica's voice was barely above a whisper. The weight of 3 lost years hung heavy in the air between us. I watched Tommy studying me with curious eyes, Emma standing protectively between her mother and me, and Jessica finally facing the consequences of her choices. The question now was whether we could find a way forward, or if too much damage had been done to repair what had been broken. But then Emma surprised me by walking over and taking my hand again. So, can we see you again, Grandma? Can we be a family again? Before I could answer, Jessica stood up from the porch steps, her expression changing to something that looked almost like panic. There's something else, Emma. Something I haven't told you about why this is all so complicated now. Emma's face fell, and I felt my stomach clench with dread. After everything we had just worked through, Jessica's tone suggested there was yet another obstacle waiting to derail any hope of reconciliation. What do you mean, Mom? Emma asked, her voice small. Jessica looked at me, then back at her children. The court order. When I filed for the restraining order 3 years ago, I didn't just tell the police and the judge about the supposed drinking. I also claimed that your grandmother had been inappropriate with you children. That she had made you both uncomfortable during visits. The words hit me like a physical blow. You told them what? I'm sorry, Margaret. I was so angry and hurt, and I wanted to make sure the order would stick. I told them you had been acting strangely around the kids, that Emma had complained about feeling unsafe. Emma gasped. Mom, I never said that. I never said anything like that. Tommy looked confused, tugging on Jessica's sleeve. What does inappropriate mean? Did Grandma do something bad? No, sweetheart, I managed, my voice shaking. I would never hurt you or Emma. I would never make you uncomfortable. Jessica knelt down next to Tommy. Grandma didn't do anything bad? Mommy told lies to some grown-ups because I was very sad and very angry, and I made terrible choices. But now we have a problem because those grown-ups wrote down my lies in important papers. I sank down onto the porch railing, feeling dizzy. Jessica, do you understand what this means? Even if you wanted to let me see the children now, legally, I can't. The restraining order is still active, and with those allegations on record— What allegations? Emma demanded, looking back and forth between us. Mom, what exactly did you tell them I said? Jessica's face crumpled. I told them that you had mentioned feeling uncomfortable when Grandma hugged you, that you had asked not to be alone with her anymore, that Tommy seemed withdrawn after visits. But none of that was true. Emma's voice rose, and I could see her hands shaking with anger. How could you lie about something like that? How could you make people think Grandma would hurt us? I felt nauseous thinking about what this meant. Even if Jessica recanted her statements, the process of clearing my name would be lengthy and complicated. And in the meantime, being here with the children right now was technically a violation of the restraining order. Mom, I said carefully, you realize that by bringing the children to see me today, you're putting us all in a difficult position legally. Jessica nodded miserably. I know. I've been trying to figure out how to fix this for months. The counselor said I need to contact my lawyer and file paperwork to have the order dismissed, but it requires admitting that I committed perjury. I could face charges. Tommy was looking more and more upset, even though he clearly didn't understand all the adult complications. Does this mean we can't see Grandma again, even though she didn't do the bad things? Emma sat down heavily on the porch steps. This is so messed up, Mom. Do you understand what you've done? You didn't just keep us away from Grandma with lies about drinking. You accused her of something that could have ruined her entire life. I looked at my granddaughter, seeing a maturity in her expression that broke my heart. At 14, she was grappling with concepts that no child should have to understand about the adults who were supposed to protect her. Emma, I want you to know that no matter what happens with the legal stuff, none of this is your fault. You couldn't have known what your mother told the court. But I should have questioned it more, Emma said, tears starting to fall again. When you stopped coming around, I should have called you myself. I should have asked more questions instead of just believing what I was told. Jessica moved to sit beside Emma on the steps. Honey, you were 11 years old. It wasn't your job to fact-check your mother or to navigate adult problems. I watched the three of them sitting there, and despite everything, I felt a surge of protectiveness for all of them, including Jessica. Yes, she had made devastating choices that had cost us 3 years and created legal complications that might take much longer to resolve. But I could see the genuine remorse in her face, and more importantly, I could see that her children needed stability, not more family destruction. Jessica, I said quietly, what exactly are you prepared to do to fix this? Because just saying you're sorry isn't going to be enough. Not for something this serious. Before Jessica could answer, Tommy suddenly stood up and walked over to me. Without saying anything, he wrapped his small arms around my waist in a fierce hug. "I missed you, Grandma," he whispered against my shirt. "I don't care about the grown-up problems. I just want you to come back." Over his head, I met Jessica's eyes and saw something that gave me hope. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking defensive or angry. She looked determined. "I'm going to call my lawyer tomorrow," she said. "I'm going to tell him everything and ask him to start the process of getting the restraining order dismissed. Whatever consequences I have to face, I'll face them." Emma looked up sharply. "What kind of consequences?" "I could be charged with filing a false police report and perjury. I might have to pay fines, or—" Jessica's voice trailed off, and I realized she was trying not to say the word jail in front of Tommy. The weight of the situation settled over us again. Even with Jessica's willingness to come forward, there was no guarantee how long the legal process would take, or what complications might arise. And in the meantime, what were we supposed to do about the fact that I was technically violating a restraining order just by being here? That's when we heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. We all froze at the sound of the car engine. The driveway gravel crunched under tires, and then we heard a car door slam. My heart hammered against my ribs as the reality of my situation crashed back down on me. Here I was, sitting on Jessica's front steps with my grandchildren, technically in violation of a restraining order that could land me in serious legal trouble. "Mom, who is that?" Emma whispered, her face going pale. Jessica stood up quickly, peering around the corner of the house toward the driveway. Her shoulders sagged with relief. "It's just Mrs. Patterson from next door. She must be visiting the Kellys." But even as she said it, I could see the fear in Jessica's eyes. We both understood how precarious this situation was. If the wrong person saw me here, if someone called the police before Jessica could get the restraining order dismissed, everything could get infinitely worse. Tommy, still clinging to my side, seemed oblivious to the tension that had suddenly gripped the rest of us. "Grandma, are you going to come inside? I want to show you my room. I have a new Lego castle." The innocent request broke my heart. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that his grandmother can't even legally step foot on his property? That his mother's lies have created a legal barrier that might take months to untangle? "Tommy, sweetheart, I can't come inside today," I said gently, stroking his hair. "But maybe soon." "Why not?" His lower lip jutted out in that stubborn way that reminded me so much of Jessica at that age. Jessica knelt down beside him. "Tommy, remember how I explained that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that have big consequences? Well, Mommy made a really big mistake, and now there are some rules we have to follow until we can fix it." "What kind of rules?" Emma asked sharply. She was old enough to sense that something serious was happening beyond just hurt feelings and family arguments. I looked at Jessica, wondering how much she was prepared to explain to her children. The truth was ugly and complicated, but they deserved some kind of honest explanation. "There's a legal order that says I'm not supposed to be here," I said carefully. "Your mom got it a few years ago when things were really bad between us. Now that we're trying to work things out, she needs to go to court and have it removed." Emma's eyes widened. "You mean like a restraining order? Like on TV?" The mature question from my 13-year-old granddaughter hit me like a physical blow. She shouldn't have to know about such things, shouldn't have to live in a world where legal orders keep families apart. "Yes," Jessica said quietly. "Like that." "But that's for people who hurt each other," Emma said, confusion clear in her voice. "Grandma would never hurt us." "No, she wouldn't," Jessica agreed, and I heard something break in her voice. "This is all Mommy's fault, Emma. All of it." Tommy looked between us with growing distress. He might not understand the legal complexities, but he could feel the weight of adult pain surrounding him. "I don't want Grandma to go away again," he said, his voice getting shaky. "I don't want to go away either, baby," I said, pulling him closer. "But right now, I have to be very careful about the rules until your mom can fix this." The sound of another car door slamming made us all tense again. This time, footsteps approached on the sidewalk, and I heard the distinct jingle of keys. Someone was definitely coming closer. "Jessica," I said urgently, "I should probably go." "No," she said firmly, surprising me. "I'm not letting fear make decisions for this family anymore. If someone asks, I'll tell them I invited you here. I'll tell them we're working things out. But if the police get involved before you can get to your lawyer, then I'll tell them the truth. That I lied, that I was wrong, and that I'm trying to fix it." Jessica's voice was stronger now, more determined than I'd heard it in years. "I'm done running from the consequences of what I did." Emma stood up and moved closer to me, positioning herself almost protectively between me and the street. "I don't care about any stupid court order," she said fiercely. "You're my grandmother, and I want you here." The footsteps passed by without stopping, just a neighbor heading home, but the moment of fear had crystallized something important for all of us. We were a family willing to fight for each other, legal complications and all. But as I looked at my daughter's determined face and my grandchildren's fierce loyalty, I couldn't shake the feeling that our real test was still coming. Tomorrow, when Jessica called her lawyer, we'd find out just how complicated this legal mess really was. And tonight, I had to decide whether to go home and wait, or to stay and risk everything on the hope that love could overcome the damage that lies had created. The choice became even more complicated when Jessica looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Would you stay for dinner? I know it's risky, but I can't bear the thought of you leaving again." "Not when we're finally talking." As if summoned by her words, I heard another car turning into the neighborhood, this one moving slowly, as if the driver was looking for something. The car's engine grew louder as it approached, and I felt my heart rate spike. Jessica must have noticed my tension because she reached over and squeezed my hand. "Mom, whatever happens, we face it together," she said quietly. "I've spent 2 years running from the truth, and look where it got us." The car passed by without slowing, just another neighbor coming home from work, but I could see the stress of the moment had affected all of us. Tommy had moved closer to me on the porch step, and Emma was still standing in that protective stance, her jaw set with determination that reminded me so much of Jessica at that age. "About dinner," I said carefully. "I want to stay more than anything, but we need to be smart about this. If your lawyer says the restraining order is still technically active, then we'll deal with whatever comes," Jessica interrupted. "But I'm not making decisions based on fear anymore. I've already lost 2 years with you because I was too scared to face what I'd done." Tommy tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma, are you scared of the police?" The innocence in his question made my chest tight. "No, sweetheart. I'm not scared of them. I'm just worried about making things more complicated for your mommy." "But Mommy said she wants to fix everything," Tommy said, looking between Jessica and me with confusion. "Why can't she just call them and say sorry?" "It's more complicated than that, baby," Jessica said gently. "When grown-ups make big mistakes like I did, sometimes it takes time to fix them properly." Emma crossed her arms. "This is so stupid. You're sitting right here being nice to each other. Anyone can see you're not dangerous, Grandma." The problem isn't whether I'm dangerous now, I explained. The problem is that your mom had to tell people I was dangerous before, to protect herself and you kids from something she thought was true. But it wasn't true, Emma said firmly. So why is everyone acting like it still matters? Jessica and I exchanged a look over the children's heads. How do you explain to a 15-year-old that lies have consequences that outlast the truth? That legal systems can't just take your word when you change your story? Emma, remember when you were little and you told me that Tommy broke my favorite vase, but it was actually you? Jessica asked. Emma shifted uncomfortably. Yeah. And remember how even after you told me the truth, it took time for Tommy to trust you again? And I had to do extra things to show him I believed him and not you? I guess, Emma mumbled. This is like that, but bigger. The courts don't know me like you do. They only know what I told them before. And now I have to prove that I was wrong. Tommy was following the conversation with the intense focus he usually reserved for his favorite cartoons. So, the court people think Grandma is bad because you told them she was bad? Yes, Jessica said simply. But now you know she's good? Now I know she was never bad in the first place. I was just so hurt and scared that I couldn't see clearly. Tommy considered this with the seriousness of a 6-year-old philosopher. So you have to tell the court people you made a mistake? Exactly. And say sorry? Yes, and say sorry. Tommy nodded as if this settled everything. Okay, so can we have dinner now? Despite everything, I found myself laughing. If only it were that simple, sweetheart. Maybe it should be that simple, Emma said, sitting back down beside me. I mean, obviously you two can work this out. You're talking, nobody's yelling, Grandma's not drunk or whatever Mom thought. Why can't we just be a family again? Because your mom needs to make sure everything is legal first, I said. I don't want to do anything that could make it harder for her to fix this. Jessica was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded in her lap. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. You know what's crazy? She said. I spent all this time protecting the kids from someone who never existed. The drunk, unpredictable mother I thought you were. But in doing that, I took away their real grandmother. The one who would never hurt them, who loves them completely. You were doing what you thought was right, I said softly. But I wasn't thinking, Jessica replied. I was just reacting to my own fear, my own pain, my own assumptions, and I never once just asked you directly what was going on. Emma leaned against my shoulder. Well, you're asking now. 2 years too late. But not too late, I said firmly. It's not too late, Jessica. We're here, we're talking, and tomorrow you'll call your lawyer. We can fix this. As if testing the fragility of the moment, Tommy suddenly announced, I'm hungry, and I want Grandma to stay for spaghetti because she makes the best garlic bread. I taught your mom how to make that garlic bread, I told him. Hers is just as good as mine now. But I want both of you to make it, he said, with the logic of childhood. Together. Jessica and I looked at each other, and I could see her struggling with the same decision I was wrestling with. Stay and risk the legal complications, or play it safe and leave this fragile reconnection hanging in the balance until lawyers could sort everything out. Before either of us could speak, Emma's head snapped up, and she was staring down the street with a frown. Mom, there's a car coming back. The same one that went by twice already. This time, the car was definitely moving slowly, and as we watched, it pulled to a stop directly in front of Jessica's house. The driver's door opened, and Mark stepped out. Even from the porch, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he hesitated before closing the car door behind him. Dad? Jessica called out, her voice uncertain. He walked toward us slowly, his eyes moving between Jessica and me, taking in the scene of his family gathered together on the front porch. When he reached the bottom of the porch steps, he stopped. "I've been driving around for the last hour," he said quietly, trying to figure out what to say. "Dad, you don't have to say anything," Jessica began, but he held up a hand. "No, I do. I really do." He looked directly at me. "Mom, I owe you an apology. A big one." Tommy bounced up from where he'd been sitting. "Daddy, are you staying for spaghetti too? Grandma and Mommy are both going to make garlic bread." Mark's face softened as he looked at his son, then back at me. "I should have asked questions. I should have come to see you myself instead of just accepting what I was told." "You were trusting your wife," I said. "That's what you're supposed to do." "But I was your son first," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And I know you. I've known you my whole life." The woman Jessica described, the one who was drinking and unpredictable and potentially dangerous to the kids. "That wasn't you. It was never you." Emma had been quiet through this exchange, but now she spoke up. "So why didn't you say anything, Dad? Why didn't you ask questions?" Mark climbed the porch steps and sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "Because it was easier not to. Because asking questions would have meant admitting that maybe my wife was wrong, or maybe she was lying, or maybe there was something going on that I didn't understand, and I was scared of what I might find out." "What do you mean?" Jessica asked, her voice very small. Mark looked at his wife with infinite sadness. "Jess, honey, you've been struggling since Emma was born. Not just baby blues, not just normal stress. Real struggling. And every time I tried to bring it up, every time I suggested maybe you should talk to someone, you shut me down." "That has nothing to do with this," Jessica said quickly. "Doesn't it?" Mark asked gently. "You started seeing problems that weren't there. You started thinking everyone was judging you, criticizing your parenting, trying to undermine you. Your mom was just the biggest target." I felt my breath catch in my throat. "Jessica, is that true?" Jessica's hands were shaking now. "I just wanted to protect my children. I wanted to be a good mother." "You are a good mother," Mark said firmly. "But you've been so afraid of being a bad one that you started seeing threats everywhere. Including from the one person who would never, ever hurt you or the kids." Tommy had climbed onto my lap during this conversation, and now he looked up at me with worried eyes. "Why is Mommy crying?" "Because sometimes grown-ups have big feelings that are hard to handle," I told him, smoothing his hair. "But we're all going to be okay." "You don't know that," Jessica said, wiping her eyes. "You don't know that everything's going to be okay. I've ruined everything. I've kept you away from the kids for 2 years. I've made Mark choose sides. I've told lies to lawyers and judges, and I don't even know if I can fix it now." Emma got up from her spot beside me and went to kneel in front of her mother's chair. "Mom, Dad's right. You have been seeing problems that weren't there. Remember when you thought Mrs. Patterson was reporting us to child services because she asked how Tommy was doing after he fell off his bike?" "That was different," Jessica said weakly. "Was it?" Emma asked. "Or what about when you were convinced my teacher was going to fail me because she asked to speak with you about my grades?" Mark leaned forward in his chair. "Jess, I've been trying to help you see this for months. Years, really. But every time I brought it up, you got angry and defensive." "Because you were all ganging up on me," Jessica said, but there was less conviction in her voice now. "No," I said gently. "We were trying to help you." "But you couldn't hear it because you were so scared," Jessica looked around at all of us, her eyes wide and frightened. So what are you saying? That I'm crazy? That I'm a terrible mother? That I've imagined everything? We're saying you're human, Mark said. We're saying you've been dealing with anxiety and fear and maybe depression. And instead of getting help for it, you've been trying to control everything around you to make yourself feel safe. Including controlling who gets to see the children, I added quietly. Tommy shifted on my lap. Mommy, are you sick? Jessica looked at her son, and for the first time since Mark had arrived, her expression softened. Not sick exactly, baby, but maybe not as well as I should be. Like when I had that fever and I thought there were monsters in my room? Tommy asked. But there really weren't? The simplicity of his comparison hit us all like a physical blow. Jessica covered her face with her hands. Oh, God, she whispered. What have I done? You protected your family the only way you knew how, I said. But now we're going to find a better way, together.